Hello and welcome back to WePC. iBUYPOWER has been kind enough to send us their Element 9260 gaming PC for review. It comes equipped with an Intel i7-9700F, GTX 1660 Ti and 16GB of memory. On the surface, it's a very capable gaming machine, but we've also put it through its paces to see how it performs in non-gaming scenarios, like multitasking, creative tasks, and general everyday use. We'll also see how future-proof this build is and possible upgrade paths. So with all that in mind, let's take a closer look at the iBUYPOWER Element 9260 gaming PC. Diving deeper into the specs, it's apparent that iBUYPOWER have prioritized gaming performance, as many cutbacks have been made outside of the CPU and graphics card pair. The motherboard is an ASUS TUF B365M. It's not much to look at, but it does the job. The system comes with a scant 240GB SSD from Apacer, who also supply the lowly single-rank 2666 MHz RAM. The CPU cooler comes from Deepcool, is just 92mm, and the power supply comes from a make called Channelwell Technology. We've never really heard of them before either. That said, we wouldn't let that put you off. After all, a 1TB hard drive is also included. Intel processors aren't terribly reliant on memory frequency, and the power supply is bronze rated, so the cutbacks are quite sensible in places. All these components come wrapped up in a bespoke tempered glass case, accented by one rear and three front addressable RGB fans. The chassis feels reasonably strong despite being light and overall looks both sleek and stylish. Furthermore, it has a relatively small footprint for a mid-tower case, owing to a lack of front cage. The case could have been a bit smaller though, as iBUYPOWER has chosen to use the ASUS TUF B365M and Micro ATX board. Like all iBUYPOWER PCs, this one comes with their standard 1-year parts and labor warranty. Fantastic if any issues do occur within that period. The system came pre-installed with Windows and only needed simple things doing like choosing a username and password. This can be done with the included keyboard and mouse, but they do leave a lot to be desired. Anyway, you can plug and play right out of the box, provided you have a monitor. We tested a variety of the latest titles looking at first-person shooters, open world games, and esports titles. So the sort of games this PC is aimed at. We also benchmarked from 1080p to 4K at a variety of graphical settings to get a good idea of where this PC tops out for playability. First up, we'll be taking a look at the popular title from Rockstar, Red Dead Redemption 2. It's one of the most demanding games on this list, so it's a great place to start. It'll give us a baseline for what we can expect going forward, and it should also give us a pretty good indication of how less intensive games run as well. If you haven't played Red Dead Redemption before, it's worth mentioning that the graphics menu isn't like other games where you get to select low, medium, or high. Red Dead used a slider style approach that allows you to prioritize between performance and quality. At 1080p and the slider set to balance, we saw an average frame rate of 84 frames per second with 1% lows of 60 frames per second. Moving the slider up to about 4/5 of the way, somewhat prioritizing quality now, we saw an average frame rate of 55 frames per second and 1% lows of 42 frames per second. Just shy of that 60 frames per second target, but still a very impressive showing from the 9260. Moving up to 1440p and setting the slider to 2/5, now favoring performance, saw an average frame rate of 68 frames per second, but the image quality wasn't quite there. Set in the middle to balance dropped this to a 44 frame per second average, with frame rates above a 30 frame per second threshold. Edging towards favoring quality, the last two tests saw identical performance strangely. You could easily cap at 30 frames per second and have some great looking 4040p gameplay. Jumping up to 4K wasn't a terrible pretty sight. The slider set to balance set most options to low, so whilst a 38 frames per second average sounds good, it certainly didn't look it. Pushing towards favoring quality saw a respectable 31 frames per second average, but frame rates were below 30 frames per second, so this would be a fairly choppy experience. On the whole, the 9260 from iBUYPOWER yielded highly respectable performance. 4K isn't feasible, but you can have an excellent 1080p and 1440p gaming experience if you tinker with the settings a little. Call of Duty Modern Warfare saw some very low 1% and 0.1% frame times, which we attribute to the engine. Averages on the whole were very good. Using the DirectX 11 API at high settings saw a 93 frames per second average at 1080p, and 62 frames per second when we bumped up to 1440p. Low and medium at 4K were very well below our target, providing 42 and 33 frames per second respectively. The game felt awkward to play, so we didn't see much point benchmarking at high. Otherwise, if you want to play Modern Warfare or the new Modern Warfare's Warzone competitively with high graphical fidelity, then this machine is more than suitable for the job. Rainbow Six Siege is a popular esports title that is highly scalable, allowing it to run on APUs at lower settings, but also push high-end systems to their limits. With all presets, we set resolution scaling to 100% so that the game was rendering at the correct resolution. With that set, 1080p low saw an average of 245 frames per second using the built-in benchmarking with 0.1% lows of 159 frames per second. So paired with a 240Hz monitor, the 9260 is more than adequate for competitive play. Dialing settings up to ultra saw 126 frames per second average and a 90 frames per second 0.1% low. This would make a perfect pairing for a 120 or a 144Hz monitor. Higher resolution saw similar scaling with 1440p ultra and 4K low edging above the 60 frames per second threshold. For CPU workloads, we're comparing against the previous iBUYPOWER PC that we tested out. It boasted an almost identical specification list but came with a Ryzen 3600 and 3000 MHz RAM. The key battle here then is Intel's 8 cores against AMD's 6. AMD, however, have SMT or simultaneous multi-threading on their side. So whilst Intel only has 8 threads, AMD has 12. For the encode and benchmark, we used a 4K HDR 60fps clip that's just over 3 minutes long and encoded it using X264 and X265. For X264, we use CRF of 18 and a preset slow, and for X265, a constant rate factor of 20 with the medium preset. We found these systems gave identical times using X264, but this system with the 9700F was almost 10% faster using X265. Blender saw similar performance, but the win was in Intel's favor by 5%. Cinebench definitely benefited from the greater thread count of the Ryzen 3600, being a whopping 15% faster. We used the benchmarks from Puget Systems to assess Photoshop and Premiere Pro performance. Interestingly, they offered extremely identical performance in Premiere Pro with 455 and 456 points. For Premiere Pro, the 9700F lost to the Ryzen 3600, but only by 4%, so it was another very close one. Streaming benchmarks were a poor showing with the 9700F. Our graphically demanding title Red Dead Redemption 2 at 1440p saw a noticeable hit to the frame time performance, despite the average frame rate remaining similar. Our mixed bottleneck title Total War Warhammer 2 saw a massive hit to performance with CPU encoding, but streaming with NVENC was actually alright. Our CPU bottleneck title CSGO saw great performance when streaming with NVENC, but those looking for higher quality stream by using X264 encoding will see a noticeable hit to performance. Looking at the X264 streams, the viewer's experience was poor as many frames were dropped or missed by OBS. We conducted a similar test in the past with the Ryzen 3600 and had a much better stream. So would we recommend it? The iBUYPOWER is an extremely good PC if you're looking to play most games in 1080p. If you're into competitive first-person shooters, such as Rainbow Six Siege or CSGO, you'll be happy with the performance this PC provides. It will easily push 150 plus FPS in less demanding games, meaning you'll be able to pair this with a high-performance 144Hz monitor and utilize G-Sync/FreeSync to its fullest potential. If you're looking to play more immersive single-player titles in 1440p, you'll be pleased with the performance that the iBUYPOWER provides too. It can squeeze past that 60 frames per second threshold on most titles if you tinker with the settings and play less demanding titles. If you plan to play intensive titles like Red Dead Redemption 2 at a resolution higher than 1920 by 1080 or really high graphical settings, you might want to look for a pre-built with a slightly more powerful GPU. Unfortunately, this PC isn't fully equipped to handle 4K, unless you're looking to play CSGO, that is. It'll struggle with most titles even at low unless you want to cap at 30 frames per second. Like we've shown, streaming with NVENC is fine, but if you want a higher quality stream by using the X264 encoder, then the 9700F just isn't going to cut it. The Ryzen 3600 gave a much better experience in this regard. So to sum up, if you're looking for a nice little starter PC that handles a ton of games in lower to medium settings, this PC could be exactly what you're looking for. Anything more intensive and you'll probably need to seek out something more powerful. If you would like to see benchmarks in some popular games, then be sure to visit the link in the description down below, which will take you to the article where we have those featured. A link to this product will be in the description down below if you would like to check it out. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, to give us a like and subscribe if you're new to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload, and we'll see you in the next video.